In this lecture, we will begin learning about music in the United States during the 19th century Romantic period. Music publications in 18th and early 19th century America were imported from Europe and devotional in nature for the most part. Some were written in an easy system of notation called the shape note system, published in hymnals such as the Sacred Harp. Singing schools were used to teach people the music. During this time, parlor ballads, show tunes, and plantation songs began, which were the forerunners of America's musical tradition. Stephen Foster was often considered America's first great songwriter. Born in Pennsylvania, he eventually moved to Cincinnati, where he wrote his first hit song, "O Susanna." Early works were written for minstrel shows, which were popular during this era. He became an alcoholic and died from a fall in his hotel room at the age of 37. Stephen Foster was one of the first Americans to make a living as a professional songwriter. His songs evoke themes of lost youth and happiness. Although he did not spend much time in the South, he wrote "My Old Kentucky Home," which is currently the state song of Kentucky, along with "Swanee River," which is the state song of Florida. Foster's classic ballad "Jeannie with the Light Brown Hair" was written in 1853 to 54, just after he separated from his wife. The song, like most of Foster's, is strophic and set for solo voice and piano, thereby meeting the growing need for parlor music appropriate for amateurs. The alternate title for the song, "I Dream of Jeannie," inspired the well-known 1960s sitcom of the same name. Listen to the 4 examples of Foster's music indicated on this slide. Gottschalk was from New Orleans, and he was the first American to achieve international acclaim as a classical composer. His works often assimilated traditional music into virtuoso piano compositions. His composition, "The Banjo," is a piano work that simulates the sound of a banjo, and the coda has some strains of Foster's Camptown Races. Listen to Gottschalk's "The Banjo." A Christian movement known as the Second Great Awakening swept the United States at the beginning of the 19th century. A feature of this was camp meetings, during which African Americans and Euro Americans gathered to sing hymns of praise and ring shouts. Slaves also had their separate camp meetings, during which the tradition of the spiritual was developed both as a way of worship and as a subversive political endeavor. Just after the Civil War, the Fisk Jubilee Singers toured, popularizing spirituals. Harry T. Burleigh and others began creating arrangements of spirituals for solo voice and piano. These were quickly adopted as concert staples in America alongside European art song. This trend overlapped with the ideals of the Harlem Renaissance. "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot" was a song popularized by the Fisk Jubilee Singers, ironically introduced to them by a white man who first heard it at a Native American school. The song exists in many arrangements and reworkings. It is loosely based on a passage from the second book of Kings, in which the prophet Elijah is taken up to heaven. The spiritual is based on a pentatonic scale and contains much repetition. Listen to 2 arrangements of the song "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot," a choral version by the Fisk Jubilee Singers and an art song arrangement by Burleigh. Ragtime is descended from the cakewalk and is a precursor to jazz. Ragtime was essentially composed piano music built on 16 measure segments that divide into 4 equal parts. Balanced phrasing and key structure were also characteristics of ragtime. Typically, it uses a syncopated rhythm in the right hand, while the left hand is primarily used for support. The recapitulations, or return to the theme statement, was mandatory. Scott Joplin was an American composer, teacher, and performer who earned the title King of Ragtime. He helped ragtime gain public notice during a performance at the 1893 World Exposition in Chicago. During 1885, Joplin played in honky-tonks and piano bars before settling in St. Louis, the center of the ragtime movement. Later, Joplin would move to Chicago and eventually wind up in New York to work. Joplin expressly sought to elevate ragtime to a serious art form, but his opera premiere, Tremonisha, was poorly received. He fell into a period of depression from which he never fully recovered. Joplin died in New York in 1917. A revival of Tremonisha in 1972 earned Joplin a posthumous Pulitzer Prize. His music is popular today, and some of his piano rags are preserved on recordings made by Joplin on Steinway player piano rolls. Listen to Joplin's Maple Leaf Rag and The Entertainer. After you are done with your listenings, this concludes the Romantic presentations. Please review the other resources in the Romantic module.